In this video, I would like to share with you the 6 stages of Jesus' trial. Although Jesus' trial lasted less than 18 hours, he was taken to 6 different hearings. యేసుక్రీస్తు తాను సెలవు ఎద్దుకు వెళ్ళకమునుపు ఆయనను గురించి చేసినటువంటి జడ్జిమెంట్ స్థలాలు 6 స్థలాలకు వెళ్ళినట్టు మనం బైబిల్లో చూస్తున్నాం. దాదాపుగా 18 గంటలు జరిగినట్టు మనం గమనిస్తూ ఉంటాం. ఆ విషయాలు ఈ వీడియో ద్వారా మీతో పంచుకోవాలని ఆశిస్తున్నాను. Betrayal in the Garden of Gethsemane. After eating the Passover meal in the upper room in Jerusalem, Jesus and his disciples went to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Judas Iscariot led the temple guards to arrest Jesus. Jesus was arrested that night and was taken to Annas' place first. We read in John chapter 18 verses 12 to 13. Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him. First they took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Both Annas and Caiaphas had been high priests. Annas was Israel's high priest from AD 6 to 15. When he was deposed by Roman rulers, Caiaphas, Annas' son-in-law, was appointed high priest from AD 18 to 36 AD. According to Jewish law, the office of high priest was held for life, but the Romans didn't like such concentration of power under one person, so they frequently changed the high priest. However, many Jews still consider Annas to be the high priest and still call him by the title. But although Annas retained much authority among Jews, Caiaphas made the final decision. The 6 stages of Jesus' trial. Although Jesus' trial lasted about 18 hours, he was taken to 6 stages. The first 3 stages before Jewish authorities, the next 3 stages, that is 3 to 6 stages before Roman authorities. Now Jesus is standing before the high priest Annas' house in the middle of the night. This is the way a high priest would be questioning Jesus. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings. And Jesus replies in John chapter 18 verses 20 to 23. I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said. And one of the officers, seeing Jesus answer as a sign of contempt for the high priest, struck Jesus in his face, probably a good hard slap, saying, "Do you answer the high priest like that?" Jesus defended himself, for he had been slapped unjustly. If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me? And after that, the Annas would send Jesus to Caiaphas' place, the high priest. After being questioned by Annas, Jesus was sent on to Caiaphas, the ruling high priest. It was still night, after midnight. Now the soldiers who arrested Jesus took Jesus, bound his hands from Annas' house to Caiaphas' house, Caiaphas' palace. In other words, he is the high priest and the powerful man among the Jewish people. They hold the law, they hold everything in their hands. And so as they were taking from Annas to the Caiaphas place, and Peter followed Jesus, or followed the group at a distance right up to courts of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. This is where Peter would be denying Jesus 3 times until the rooster crows. The high priest and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidences against Jesus so that they could put him to death. Let me give a little bit of information about Sanhedrin. Let us understand who these people known as Pharisees in the New Testament, in the 4 Gospels, especially Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The Pharisees means a separated party. The sect of Pharisees is thought to have originated sometime during the 3rd century BC, before the Maccabean Wars. During this time, under Greek domination, there was a strong Greek to Hellenize the Jews. It means all the Jews need to follow the Greek customs, food, clothes, sports, and the language, and above all, to worship Greek gods. They were forbidden not to worship their God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yahweh. So in that situation, many Jews were accepting the Greek culture with its pagan religious customs. The rise of the Pharisees was a reaction and protest against the tendency to conform to Hellenism among their fellow countrymen. The goal of the Pharisees was to preserve their Jewish national integrity and a strict conformity to Mosaic law. Over time, they developed into a self-righteous and hypocritical group, observing the outward formalities of the law. Pharisees are not theologians, but rather a group of pious laymen from every part of the community, traders, craftsmen, professionals, men, or professional men, in other words. Only their leaders were theologians. According to Josephus, a 1st century historian, where there were more than 6,000 Pharisees in Israel, in Palestine. Back then they were calling that land, in the 1st century AD. We see in the Gospels of New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, a group of people known as scribes. Some of the Pharisees went to study the law of Moses thoroughly. They spent some years of education understanding the complete implications and applications of the Mosaic law, the Torah, the Pentateuch. They are known as the scribes. They are theologians, teachers of the law, who have had some years of education. Their main job was copy the law of Moses and teach and explain to the common public. They are known as the lawyers of the law, experts in the law. They had high regard in the society. And any problem would come, they would go to them. So therefore, any time they appear in the synagogues or in the temples, they had a special place for them to sit. If they are in the wedding ceremony, they had a special place to sit. They are regarded as highly professional people in the society. We see in the New Testament the other prominent group of people. They are known as Sadducees. It's a noun. The Sadducees were so named because they claimed to be descended from Zadok, the high priest at the time of King David and King Solomon. They consisted of the wealthy aristocratic families who controlled the office of high priest. They rejected belief in angels and the resurrection, but they were not liberal rationalists. Rather, they were staunch conservative who observed the law of the Book of Moses, Pentateuch, and who rejected later interpretation of the law, the oral law. They only believed the 5 books of the Old Testament, the law of Moses. Sadducees were angered at Jesus cleaning the temple, at his teaching on the resurrection. Jesus was taken from Annas' house to Caiaphas' palace that night, and then he called for a Sanhedrin committee meeting. This committee has a power and authority to make a judgment or decisions upon a person who might have done some crime against the law of the Romans, and or if they have committed any violation of the Jewish law of Moses, they have authority to take a decision and put a person to death or to punish, whatever way they can decide. So Jesus that night was standing in the palace of Caiaphas, and he would call for his committee members. Who are these members? 70 of them would be there, and some of them from the Pharisees group, some of them from experts in the law, we call them scribes, and some would be from Sadducees, and then they also pick up some prominent, well-respected people from the community. And then the chief priest, the Caiaphas, would be the 71. So this is the committee. Now they're going to deal with the situation in the night. But they're not supposed to meet in the night to make any criminal decisions. No legal meetings should be conducted, but everything in their hands. So they were not caring for any such norms and rules. They were doing in a hurry because they want to get rid of Jesus before the Passover festival comes. That is their main concern. In Matthew chapter 26, verses 57 down, we see what exactly took place that night in the Caiaphas house as he gathered his Sanhedrin committee. They couldn't find any viable witnesses against Jesus' crime. So finally, the high priest stood up, and let me read from Matthew chapter 26, verse 62 down. Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. "But I say to all of you, in the future you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? What is your verdict?" "He is worthy of death," they answered. Everyone said, "He is worthy to die. Put him to death." But only 2 people did not consent their oath for their decision in favor of putting Jesus to death. That was the Joseph from Arimathea and Nicodemus. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fist. Others slapped him and said, "Prophesy as Christ, who hit you." Before Roman authorities, the first hearing before Pilate, Luke chapter 23, verses 1 to 5. The religious leaders, means high priest and the Sanhedrin committee, had condemned Jesus to death on religious grounds, but only the Roman government could grant the death penalty. So they took Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor, and accused him of treason and rebellion. Before they accused him of blasphemy. In the Roman law, blasphemy is not at all a punishable crime. Therefore, they changed the crime from blasphemy to treason, means somebody is there to overthrow the government and overthrow the king, emperor, Caesar. The crimes from which the Roman government gave the death penalty. Pilate saw at once that Jesus was innocent, but he was afraid that the religious leaders would report him to Caesar for not dealing with a rebel. Now Jesus is standing before Herod. Luke chapter 23 verses 6 to 12. Because Jesus' home was in the region of Galilee, Pilate sent Jesus to Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas is the one who beheaded the head of John the Baptist. He is son of Herod the Great, and now is a ruler of Galilee, and who was in Jerusalem for the Passover celebration. Herod was eager to see Jesus to do a miracle, but when Jesus remained silent, Herod wanted nothing to do with him and sent him back to Pilate. There is some information we need to know about these two people. Jesus, a Jew coming from the tribe of Judah, son of Jacob, whereas Herod Antipas and his father Herod the Great, he is known as Edomite or Edomians, red hair, red skin. They are descendants of Esau, twin brother of Jacob, and they are children of Rebekah and Isaac. They have been bitter enemies throughout the Old Testament. Now, we see how God is orchestrating. The enemy wanted to destroy God's plan, even at this scene, but enemy didn't have any victory. At every place, God's plan has been succeeded. So this is the little information for you to see how the Bible is moving to bring salvation plan for the humanity. Final hearing before Pilate, Luke chapter 23, verses 13 to 25. Pilate didn't like the religious leaders. He wasn't interested in condemning Jesus because he knew Jesus was innocent. However, he knew that another uprising in his district might cost him his job. First, he tried to compromise with the religious leaders by having Jesus beaten, an illegal action in itself. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead of an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." By saying that, he finally gave in and handed Jesus over to be executed, crucified. Pilate's self-interest was stronger than a sense of justice. This is how that Friday morning the judgment has been given to Jesus Christ to be crucified.